I definitely understand what it means not to be attached to anything. Um, I mean, I've been working on that for a while. I mean, I used to collect antique toys, things like that. And even now as I'm sort of going through this, um, and other things too, I could see that those things were purchased. Like I used to go the thrill for the hunt or, trying to find happiness through those things. I can see it very, very clearly now. And I realize now very deeply that things will never make you happiness. Happiness really does come from inside, and it's a choice, just like everyone says it is, like from Abraham Lincoln to Marcus Aurelius. It's like nothing outside of yourself will ever make you happy.
You're currently listening to Billy Atwell. He is the host of the Top 300 Apple podcast, Unshakable Self-Confidence, where he and his guest helps his listeners to discover the root of all their self-doubt, overcome their painful past, and most importantly, transform into a truly confident individual. He's also the author of the best-selling book, Unshakable Self-Confidence. I'm totally stoked about my conversation with Billy. It's very genuine and vulnerable and transparent. So let's get this thing started, guys. Let's get after it. You're currently listening to Billy Atwell. He's the host of the Top 300 Apple podcast, Unshakable Self-Confidence, where he and his guests help his listeners to discover the root of all their self-doubt, overcome their painful past, and most importantly, transform into a truly confident individual. He's also the author of the best-selling book, Unshakable Self-Confidence. I'm excited about the transparency, the vulnerability, and the honesty of this conversation. And I am excited about the power behind it, the intention. So let's get this thing started. Let's get after it. This is Your Superior Self, episode 86, Unshakable Self-Confidence, with podcaster and author Billy Atwell. Our deepest fear is not that we are weak. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Nelson Mandela. What is up, Superior Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Your Superior Self. I'm Trey Downs, and this week has been pretty remarkable. I was lucky enough to attend Shift University's event called Complicated Conversations, and it had speakers like Richard Saul Wurman and Steve Kotler, Joe McClinsky, Chris Wilson, and it was phenomenal. It was very cool to connect with those people and listen to their messages, and it was such a surreal moment for me when Mr. Wurman came on the stage and gave his talk, his conversation, and it was nothing short of a conversation. It's crazy, his ability to draw in a room and how his conversations like pull you in like magnetically. Like you're just, I mean, you can hear a pin drop when he talks, because everyone is pulled into what he's talking about. And it really resonated with me, because that's kind of what I want to do with the podcast, and how I want my interviews to go is just like a conversation. Think about two friends that don't know each other, that have this genuine connection and are able to talk about whatever we feel like talking about, and connecting with someone on a personal level that you don't even know, and be able to relate or discuss or sometimes even argue points, but to be able to respect that and just be in the moment and feel their connection. I mean, I know it sounds kind of weird, connection. We don't have enough of that nowadays. I think connection is something that is being lost with the technology, and where we're going as a society. And I think it's more important than ever to reestablish that connection. So, I mean, next time you're in a conversation, just try to be in it. Try to be all in on the conversation, and don't be distracted by a cell phone or your own thoughts. But be really in it and imagining yourself, regardless of the conversation. Even if you don't agree with it, just be in it, because it's personally, it's a moment for growth for everyone, right? Like being able to talk to somebody who even you don't like, but being able to, I guess, withstand that conversation, or be respectful, and you might learn something that you didn't know before. I mean, we can always learn something from someone. I definitely learned a ton of great information about technology, about mortality, about morality, and I'm excited to share that with you in upcoming episodes. Like, one thing that Richard said that really hit home for me was education system is not the same thing as a learning system. And it was kind of surreal. I mean, I guess I never really thought about the comparison in that way, but the learning system is so different than the education system. So the education system has a ton of different fulfillments that you have to meet, requirements. Like for me, going back and getting my degree in business, I have to get, accounting, marketing, statistics, math requirements, a couple of sciences in there too. But it is a ton of different courses that fall under the umbrella of business. And the learning system is something that connects personally to you. So you're going to remember everything that interests you. So you pick up a book about marketing, for me, that interests me. I'm gonna remember a lot of that content, a lot of the key points and definitions and strategies to that book. But if I pick up a book about biology, like it might interest me to a point, but I'm not going to remember all of that. And it's kind of crazy to me. And the more that I think about it, that I take a test for biology to meet the requirement, but after I take that test, basically all I'm doing is just memorizing all the content for that test. And then after that test, it's, see you later, man. Making room for the marketing stuff that interests me. But I think it's a great point that we need to tailor our education system more so towards the learning system, which is what really interests us. Think about it in your life. What interests you, right? Like, you're going to learn more about that subject, and you're going to retain a lot more of that subject. And I think it's a great opportunity for us, right? Like, the education system is where we get the titles of earning our degrees, earning our masters or our doctorates. But the learning system is for everyone, really. I mean, that's where self-growth is, upping your mental game, if you want to say it like that. But it's something to make you think, and just not change your viewpoint, but kind of give you a different side of things, a different argument, I guess. And that's what I love about Shift University and this conference called Complicated Conversations. Make sure you guys go check it out for next year. I don't know who's going to be there yet, but I'm excited for it. I'm definitely going next year, and I'm interested in hearing more about what you think about the education system being what it is, and the learning process, the learning system, what your thoughts are on that. So hit me up on yoursuperiorself.com. Leave me a message. You can check me out on social platforms, on Facebook at Trey Downs, Instagram at TDowns80, and on Twitter at DownsTrey. Hit me up, give me a shout out. Even sign up for my email list. You can do that on the website, yoursuperiorself.com. Sign up for the email list and get all of my episodes and notes and news sent directly to your inbox. So that way you don't have to miss a week of inspiration, of motivation. You can also text the word superior to 444-999, and that will automatically sign you up for the email list as well. And getting into today's subject, to get into today's conversation with Billy Atwell, which I'm very excited because he's a fellow podcaster and he's doing great things over there. Billy Atwell is the host of one of the top 300 Apple podcasts, I think it is. It's called Unshakable Self-Confidence, and he has like an interview-based conversation with people who've had a painful past, how they overcome their obstacles, and most importantly, how they transform into a truly confident and inspiring individual. I love my conversation with Billy. It's very, very vulnerable and very transparent. We connect. We definitely talk about some powerful subjects, and I'm very excited to share this with you. So let's go, guys. Here is my conversation with Billy Atwell. Billy, it is a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show.
Hey Trey, how's it going? Yeah, I'm really excited about continuing a conversation with you here today. It's awesome.
So, for those who don't know, I was a guest. I was a guest on Billy's podcast, and that conversation went really well. And I was like, Billy, I have to have you on the show, man. Like you have this great story, and I want to connect you with my audience. So, why don't you go ahead and give us an update? What's going on in your world today?
Uh, well, I'm definitely living what I preach. I'm walking the walk and not just talking the talk. There's as you know, there's a lot of crap going on in my life right now, and so I'm putting to use all the things that I've learned in the last 6 years about what self-confidence is, and kind of extending on what our conversation was on my show about vulnerability, on authenticity, and um, just going with the flow and not stressing about things and seeing the bigger picture and not really getting caught up in these life dramas that I think most people do. I feel like I'm being um, tested and cleansed and stripped. And I'm actually welcoming it. If that
Mm.
makes sense. Yeah.
Well, can you go a little deeper on that? So, I don't want to tell your story for you, but you're in a transition period. You have a second, not a second job, but you're working somewhere, and I don't want to tell your story for you, but you're in a transition period that you are definitely on this mission of finding yourself and, like you said, cleansing. Can you dive a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah. So what had happened was I had worked for the same company for 20 years, an international medical nonprofit. We created educational programs and helped created resource access, primarily in sub-Saharan Africa, dealing with HIV/AIDS and things like tuberculosis and malaria. And like I said, I've been with the company for 20 years. I started out as an intern, made it to a vice president, was currently working on a podcast for them for one of their joint efforts with UNAIDS on what's called the Fast Track Cities Initiative, which is I won't get too deep into it. It's complicated, but there was a new director of communications that was hired to handle communications within the company, but also to be part of the podcast. And dude was an asshole, man. And I've been with the company for 20 years. I've had carte blanche in communication, and no one relayed with me the new protocol. The office is in DC. I live in Chicago. Um, I have the trust of the president and CEO. I mean, and I communicated with the membership base. Hey, we've got this really new, awesome podcast that's, here to help you. And the dude just went ballistic. And I got a call from the president and the CEO, and it's like, this is the way things are. I'm sorry that I didn't tell you this, and left it at that. And then I was trying to be the bigger person, and I made a courtesy call to this new director of communications, and being, dude, I'm not trying to step on your toes. I'm not trying to cause any problems. It's just, this is the deal. This is my history. And, he just went off and started being really violent, not only just threatening my job, but threatening my person. And um, my history, just so that you know why I did what I did, is that I was in abusive relationships with alcoholics and narcissists, and it was just very violent. And I've come enough in my journey now, 6 years after that second one ended, in this process that turned into be my podcast, Work and Everything, about identity and why we get into these relationships when we don't have good core identities and what does confidence mean and all that stuff. I was like, uh, I literally said I would rather work minimum wage, than to deal with this, and that's what I did. I up and quit, um, and got me a job at Home Depot working in the delivery department, because I just was not gonna tolerate that. I was not gonna deal with another freaking narcissist in my life
Mm,
who had to resort to violence in order to get his way because he had a poor self-image or whatever his backstory is. It really doesn't matter. It
hmm.
was it was messed up, man.
Yeah, that is terrible, and the fact that you weren't supported by that company is even worse. You know, you decided to go with minimum wage. Like when you left that company, like what was the first thing? What was the first thought in your mind? Like was it a fearful thought? Was it a inspirational? I get to do what I want to do now. Like what was that thought?
No, I mean, I've had liberties working for them. I mean, I was working on my own show. I mean, I created my own show, and because of the success of my own show, they finally listened to me like, you guys need a podcast. So I had a lot of creative freedom. I was writing books, doing Facebook Lives for my community,
Mm-hmm.
and working from home. And I was had free time through the day to discover how to meditate and doing yoga. I mean, I had a lot of creative freedom. Initially, I was driven. I don't know if you understand or if your audience will understand, but when you're in those threatening situations, your adrenaline kicks in, and it really is that amygdala, the fight or
Mm-hmm.
fright. And it was like, I've got to get out of this. And I was super adrenaline out there doing that's all I could think about was finding another job right away just to keep some cash rolling through the door. I didn't think about any loss. The thoughts of loss, like we were talking on my show, um, started to come after the adrenaline started to wear off. And I started to see that I'm working really long hours to basically make the same amount of money that I was maybe working 10 hours a week for. I'm working 40, 45 hours a week at night. And so a lot of freedom has been taken away from me because of that. I'm not upset about it. I think, you know, like I said, I see the bigger picture, and I know that we were talking on my show the concept of just be still and know that I'm God, and it's just I'm starting to see this is just a moment in time. I wanted independence, I wanted greater responsibility. These were some of the things that I was praying for at the beginning of the year, and this is the answer to that, and I have to accept that and be thankful for it and go through it instead of complaining and whining and um
Hmm. Well, you
yeah.
said your freedom has been taken away. You talking about now with the Home Depot job? You feel like your freedom's been taken away, or are you talking about before?
Well, Home Depot is pretty sweet. I'm not knocking Home
Yeah,
Depot.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying with the hours that I work, I don't have that freedom of time to structure the day that I want to do it.
Mm,
I've got to leave the house. I got to go to a job. I've got to work. I'm working. I don't get home till like 11 o'clock at night. And then, I mean, I'm still getting up early. I'm an early riser. I've always liked, it goes back to my competitive rowing days, up at 4. So, and I do my reading and I do my meditating and all that stuff. It's just, it's been difficult to keep up with my community and to do the Facebook lives and
mm,
to create videos and content and because I just don't have that time during the day.
mm.
Um,
What time do you
so
have to go in? Like around 11 or so?
no, I'm in there at 1.
Mm.
I'm in at 1. So I'm there. And so, I mean, I've got to leave here in order to commute. And so I've got about 5 hours in the morning.
How are you getting by on minimum wage? How's that?
Yeah. I don't know how people do it,
What
honestly.
is it now?
It currently in Chicago, it's $12. It's about to go up to 13 in the summer. So, yeah.
And I feel like an ass even having to ask that question. Like, what is it now? Like $12, like an hour. How do people do it? Like, how do you do it? Did you? I mean, I'm sure you had to cut back on a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah. Um, things like, and I got rid of Netflix, which was probably a good deal. I mean, I had my shows that I would binge watch like everyone else, but I really didn't watch that much TV. I haven't had TV in at least a decade.
Mm.
Um, I'm just not a big television watcher. I have a very simple eating structure. I mean, I have really nice coffee. I didn't skimp on the coffee. I'm also a green tea drinker, and I don't do bags. I do loose. So there was trying to find something within my budget, things like that. I eat canned mackerel with my steamed rice. I'm buying like navy beans and in bulk and making crock pots. Um, and that may sound horrible. And my grocery bill is only like $30 a week, but
Wow, how do you make it on $30 a week? Like, if I spent $30, I think I spend like close to $30 a day. I mean, with a family, it's crazy.
yeah, well, I don't, it's just me. So, but again, I don't want to give the wrong impression. I really am through this process starting to really realize my gratitude levels are going
Mm,
to new depths that are unbelievable. It's like I'm not going hungry. I'm not starving. I'm enjoying my life. Um, and I don't want to put anyone in a box or anything, but I would think that most people would agree. Most people complain.
hmm
Um, and they complain about when they have good things going on in their lives. And it's just, like I said, I really feel like I'm in this testing, cleansing thing that's going to take me to a new level. And I've got to do it in order to get to that new level, which I wanted to do, which is to be totally independent and free and be that life coach. And, um,
yeah, you're
yeah,
purifying yourself. I mean, you're basically living this minimalist lifestyle.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, and you're purifying yourself of all the things that society says you have to buy, and society is saying you have to be of this status, you have to have this job, you have to make this amount of money, you have to drive this car, and you're kind of purifying yourself of that, right? And like, what are the new freedoms that you're finding?
I definitely understand what it means not to be attached to anything. Um, I mean, I've been working on that for a while. I mean, I used to collect antique toys, things like that. And even now as I'm sort of going through this, um, and other things too, I could see that those things were purchased. Like I used to go the thrill for the hunt or, trying to find happiness through those things. I can see it very, very clearly now. And I realize now very deeply that things will never make you happiness.
Mm.
Happiness really does come from inside, and it's a choice, just like everyone says it is, like from Abraham Lincoln to Marcus Aurelius. It's like nothing outside of yourself will ever make you happy. And I know when we were talking on my show, some of the thoughts I've been having lately is, you know, amassing things or being at that super sort of Tony Robbins level. It's like, what is it? Is it really that important? Because when you leave this existence, you don't get to take anything. You don't get to take the good or the bad. You check out. So it's like, why? I analyze everything now, and it's like, do I really need that? Is it going to add to my life? Am I doing it for the right reasons? I don't know if that makes sense,
Yeah,
but
it
it,
makes total sense. I think pre-show we were talking about a woodworking shop had caught your eye, right? And I think you need to take advantage of that, right? I mean, if you're going to be making minimum wage, I feel like you need to get something out of it. Like if you're going to sacrifice your livelihood, sacrifice, giving up certain wants, you need to, do something that's going to not, not only fulfill you, but also build some skill, right?
well, I think to do skills that I already have, but kind of like when we were talking before on my show about this concept and societal pressures, and like you know, we were saying a little bit earlier before, it's like it's my life. What do I want from my life? This is my gift and my one go around. And, you know, especially because we're in this field, right? There's that
Mhm.
pressure to be not only perfect, but to be at a certain economic level. And it's like, do the webinars and, you know, sell, sell, sell. And it's like, I don't think I really want to do that, man. I, you know, I think I just want to get up and be happy and peaceful and contribute to the world. And
Create art.
yeah, I mean, build some furniture and just be a nice guy and be able to see what most people don't see and appreciate it.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people are always expecting something like, I'll give you this for this in return, and to be the exact opposite and genuinely create something of like a piece of you, and give that away without expecting anything. That's huge.
Yeah.
That's freeing as well. I mean, to be able to free yourself of that. I don't know what it is. What is that? Like that expectancy of getting something in return, like that. I don't know. Like Seth Godin was talking about it in his book. This is marketing, where he was like, he just got in from the airport and he was going to the hotel and he asked people, "Do you want to share a ride to this hotel?" And they're like, "No, no, no." Even though he's Seth Godin, they didn't want to share a ride because they didn't want to feel like they owed him something, right? Like he was trying to do something genuinely nice for someone, but no one wanted to take him up on that because they didn't want to feel like they would owe him anything. And it's like I don't know. I just feel like with all the noise that's going on in this world today, like it's hard to find people like that. So you are a gem, Billy. Let me tell you that.
Thanks, man. Yeah, no, I appreciate, I do appreciate the validation.
Well, talk about your podcast, right? You were talking about you were in a relationship that was a little shaky and abusive. I think you said abusive. I don't want to put words in your mouth,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
your podcast name is Unshakable Self-Confidence. Like what started this podcast?
So about 6 years ago, God, it might be a little bit longer, around 2012, whatever, you know, you guys can do the math. I'm not good at math. Uh, you know, after that second, I started standing up for myself. I started to see these repeated patterns in my partner, and I stood up for myself and was like, I'm not going down this road again. I'm not going to accept this sort of behavior. I'm not going to live with this kind of behavior. And so what happened was because just an infantile narcissist started being strangled to death. And so that was a huge sort of moment for me, and I went into shock. And a friend of mine, who I'll give a shout out to, Holly Emanuelson, she gave me a copy of Joyce Meyer's Battlefield of the Mind. And because Joyce had been sexually abused by her father, she talked about it, and she talked about you know, her transformation and learning about the power of your thoughts, like as a man thinketh so you become, and this core identity. She came from a Christian background and explained it that way. But that was, I mean, I've always been a reader. We know we talked about our passion for books and stuff, but I've always been a reader. But I just at that point, just something, it was a difficult book. I was throwing it down, you know, because she was saying, you know, you're in these situations because of you. And most victims of abuse do not want to hear that. And um, I just kept reading it. And then the next book came, and then the next book came. And so, about 3 years after reading and researching and starting my own process, I started the podcast. It was originally called Fear Not. Um, and I knew that there were other people out there who were living in shame and fear. And I wanted to break that myth that I'm alone kind of thing, and that isolation and the quietness of it. And um, that's, you know, who, you know, to my audience is, you know, I just, people, it is primarily women, but I mean, there are men in there too who've gone through these abusive situations. And I help them to realize that it's not your fault. We talk about this core identity that sort of get passed down. I call it the inherited negative self-image route, and we've got to change that so you can avoid those relationships, so you can break the cycle. And so that's what the show is. And we talk about it from spiritual practices, we talk it from neuroscientific practices, and
Mm.
we talk about like Marcus Aurelius. We talk about Jesus. We talk about Buddha, Gandhi, and how does meditation fit into that? What is mindfulness? And all these things that we live in this great time, where all this historical information is coming together and science is proving it valid and significant. And I think there's just sort of this, sort of awakening going on. And I didn't intend to be this way, um, but it's just sort of it. It was my path. It was my journey.
Mm.
Uh,
What did you like? What did you feel when you mentioned that when you were reading it that she had said that it was your choice to be in the situation, or is that right?
Well, it wasn't a choice per se, but it was because of our thought process.
Mm.
You because you feel like so like in my case, my stepfather and his dad did it to him, and that's why I kind of termed it or coined it, I should say, inherited negative self-image. He had a sister, his father, elevated the sister into this golden child status and degraded him, and so that's what he did with me and my half brother. And so I grew up with this concept of not being worthy, bad. I mean, these are all these words. And so he painted a new picture of my self identity, and I accepted it as a child. And so the way that Joyce, explains it is that thought, those thoughts that you allow in your head, like even if it's just simple ones, even if you don't have an abusive background, it's like, I'm stupid or I'm careless, or you're manifesting that. You're creating that reality based on your self talk. So, in my circumstances, um, and realizing that I was truly, honestly, the common denominator in these abusive relationships, it was the one consistency.
Mm.
That was a big pill for me to swallow. It was not easy, but
Well, you talked about self talk, right? Like,
yeah.
what was the self talk that you were giving yourself? Like, was it? I mean, give me an example.
Um, so within the relationships, like I'm very empathic. I have really great instincts, and so I knew things were going on, like the infidelity and all that stuff, and I would try to confront it, particularly in the first marriage. And I was gaslighted. I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but it was like, no, you're just imagining that. So, in the first time you let that slide, and you know that but you allow your spouse to create that doubt, then that voice of self-doubt. It's like, well, you're stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. And that was just a constant repetitive thing. It's like, you're so stupid, you know, you're so stupid. You don't know what's going on. Um, I mean, that was just some of the talk in my head. But yeah, I mean, it yeah, and that started to change. That started to change after reading Joyce's book and realizing that it's like, I knew all this stuff along. I just didn't trust myself. I didn't trust that voice. I didn't listen to it. And the end result was I got into these situations because I didn't listen to the voice that was trying to guide and protect me.
Mm. I think I know for myself, it's like that little voice. Like sometimes it's hard to hear it, right? Like I feel like you have all these thoughts in your mind, and they kind of direct you where you know your everyday decisions. But like what we're talking about here is that little tiny voice that's coming from your being, right? Like your soul, like that small little voice. I think we drown out a lot, and I think what you're doing now, like the cleansing and the meditation and being by yourself and being in it, I think to me that's when you hear that inner voice the most, right? Like I feel like there's so many distractions out there, there's so much white noise with everything that's going on, especially with technology. And I mean, you see it everywhere you go. People are just earbuds all the time. Like it's just insane. Like Facebook, mobile devices. Like I'm a I'm not saying I'm perfect. I do that as well, but in times like this where you have these monumentous occasions in your life where, like you're talking about with your spouse or with your job or any type of situation like that where it's going to be impactful for the rest of your life. Like, you need to really listen to that inner spirit, that inner voice, and listen to what it's saying, or listen to what you were saying, because that's the true version of yourself, right? I mean, wouldn't you agree that it's in moments that we're like in desperation, that the hardest moments of our lives, that we really got to be quiet and be in it, and instead of trying to run away and get away from the pain, like we need to sit in it and just be in it and reflect and try to listen for that voice.
Yeah, I think that that's a good starting point. To be honest, I'm at the point in my life where I realize that no thoughts are mine. Like Buddha and Jesus said, it's like the stream of
Mm,
consciousness, and your job is to filter out. You know, I really do believe that thoughts are not us. I think we identify too much, and I think that's the ego. It's like to say that I'm stupid is just as much, or to say that I'm smart is just as egoist as saying I'm stupid. I think the point is to learn the distinction between a negative charged thought and a positive charged thought, or a light filled charged thought, and filter out the negative. Buddha talked about filtering out, the negative thoughts, and so did Jesus. And that's what I see. It's like I don't put that pressure on anymore of like, these are my thoughts. I'm so stupid, or I'm bad. I'm bad because I have these thoughts. No, thoughts are not of you. Emotions are not you. They're these external things that come and pass through you. And what I've learned is it's just turn your focus or your gaze when you meditate or when you live your life, um, on the positive. And um,
well,
I
it's tough because it's like your mind has like this advantage over us, right? Like our mind, when you say our thoughts are not us, it's just kind of like I'm trying to grasp it. Like I kind of understand what you're saying
yeah,
about your thoughts not being you, but like our minds have like this advantage over us because it knows our fears, it knows our weaknesses. Very, it is us, and we believe them very easily, right? Like we don't, when our heart speaks to us, we don't know the difference. Like we don't know what it is, but we know our mind is running all the time and it knows every weakness that we have. And it's easier to believe that weakness than our heart telling us our strengths.
yeah, your mind is basically a big processing center. And when you accept a thought from the ether, if you will, it actually physically manifests as neural logical structure, that fire and wire and the repeat. That's where you get these belief systems, is that when you plant the seed of any thought, whether it be negative or positive, it becomes an organism. It becomes part of your brain, and then that becomes part of your computer programming. And so that's what I teach, is that you have to step away from that and step away from the biology of our human existence, to see that every thought, whether good or bad, is something that's growing inside of your brain. It's literally a neurological root. That's where I get the root analogy. It's because it looks like a root. It looks like a tree root. I use a lot of root analogy. And so you can starve those negative thoughts, and like any other organism, first of all, it's going to fight for survival. That's why it's so difficult to break habits. When it's like you're trying to do the gym and you hear those thoughts of, I can't do it, it's because that thought process, that thought is a series of, neurological networks in your brain, and it doesn't want to die. But if you
Mm-hmm.
can focus on the good and feed the good, plant a good seed, and put all your energy to that, well, then there's no energy in the negative, and it literally, that neurological series of networks that contains the belief that you're stupid or crazy or whatever, disappears out of your brain. I mean, this is what's going on in with the brain scans. I mean, it's just simple biology. And I don't mean to belittle anyone. It's just I've been doing this for a really long time, and it's been a long process. It's just you really can hack your thought process. You can hack your body, and you can restructure yourself. We're so organic, and we have the ability to create ourselves into anything that we want. And yeah, that's a little too deep, but that's what we talk a
That's the
lot about. And I
science. I love the science behind it,
yeah,
though. Like, like I love the science. I think I call it resistance, right? Like you call it something else. I call it resistance. I guess just to give it a name, right? Like I always had this idea of it was laziness, right? Like, I mean, I guess that's what I called it at an early age because I didn't know what it was. Like, I didn't feel like going for a run. I didn't feel like going to the gym. I didn't feel like doing my homework. But in reality, it was for me, I call it resistance because it's trying to win the day. It's trying to
yeah,
overthrow my momentum, and
yeah.
you can't let
It,
that happen.
yeah, no, I was going to say you're exactly right. Resistance. I talk about resistance a lot. It's like whether whether you come from a background like me where you've got a really negative core image that you've got to break away from, or you want to run, you're locked into that negative sphere. I call it like a gravitational pull, and it takes a lot of energy to break. It's just quantum physics. It's just basic science, and it's like
Hmm.
in order to break free from any gravitational pull, like a rocket to break free from Earth's gravitational, requires a lot of fuel, and that's where you pump yourself up with affirmations, and you do wonderful things like change your body chemistry through exercise until you get into that new sphere of positive thinking, and then it's just maintenance.
Mm.
um, yeah, we could sit here and talk about the science all day. I love this stuff, but yeah, no, you're totally on course. You're totally on course. It is a resistance and of old behavioral patterns, and yeah, yeah.
I think it's just hard to get over those old patterns, right? It's hard to break those. Like, what is one technique that someone can use, like, to break those patterns?
Well, I think first of all, you need to understand what's going on biologically. You've got to equip yourself with what's happening instead of taking the blame. It's just pure chemical. Your body, when it's in a negative state, it's addicted. Your body's a junkie. It runs on chemicals, and most people, like 99% of the world, it runs on cortisol, which is toxic. And so you've got to readjust your body into pumping things like endorphins. So when I started out, before I really started to learn about positive affirmations, I started to walk. I started to change my body chemistry. I didn't understand it at the time, but when you run, that's what the runner high is. And so what I teach now is, when the women come to me and they want to change their self identity, we we create the uh, opposite of what the belief system is, and then we do the positive affirmations, and we use it in the mirror and with energy. We get that we force the body to create some energy so that you're breaking free from its static negative gravitational orbit
Hmm.
around negativity. And that's the best thing that you can do, is because a lot of people are like, oh, I'm a wonderful person, I'm a wonderful person. Well, that's not enough. You've got to break the gravitational pull, and that requires energy and fuel. And you do that. I mean, if you did like 5 minutes of jumping jacks before you did your positive affirmation, you're switching your body chemistry and you're pumping yourself up, and that's when you start to break free. You've got to put energy and force behind any practice. I don't think
I'm
most
so
people talk
I'm
about
so
that enough.
bad at I'm so bad at the affirmation part, right? Like, I just how do you, like, what are some examples of your positive affirmations? Like, what do you say to yourself?
So, to make it contemporary, because I don't have a negative self-image anymore, at least not the things like that. It's so the whole thing with Home Depot, I mean, I used positive affirmation, and I used the energy that was going on, even though it was anxiety. I used it, I burned it off. I
Mm.
used it and I channeled it, and I was like, I am better than this. I can do anything I want. I don't have to deal with this. And I would do it in front of the mirror, and I would get myself pumped up. And I would try that, Trey. I really would. Whatever your positive affirmation is, pump yourself up first
Mm.
and supercharge your positive affirmations because, like I said,
Well, it's all
that's
energy. It's all energy, right? So, like, I tend to have a less successful podcast interview when I have lower levels of energy. It's all about, and it was so weird. I couldn't put my finger on it. Like, I just didn't know what it was. Like, I was, you know, I always have great episodes after a bad one. Just because I'm that determined. I'm like, I'll never do that again. Like, I didn't like what I did there, and maybe I'm just not feeling the interview, or me and the other guests aren't vibing very well. But it's like, it's all about your energy. Like, if I get in there and I'm like really pumped, like you and I have great energy. Like, we feed off each other. I could feel it. Like, I could feel your intensity and your passion about your podcast, and about inspiring others. But sometimes it's not like that. Like, I'm sure you can attest to this. Like, there are some guests where it's kind of like pulling teeth when you're talking to them. It's like they are so good at what they do that it's kind of hard for them to get out of their comfort zone, or it's hard for them to talk about it because it's like they deal with it every day and they don't really want to, like, I guess in layman's terms, break it down. But it's all about your energy and how you approach it. Like, if I come in there and I'm all pumped up and I get my energy right, and like you say, like, practice those positive affirmations, which I need to work on. Like, I'm not really good at it. I'm better at visualization than I am affirmations. But if I go in there and it changes my energy, and I can project, an energy that's attractive for the guests, like, it's going to be an explosive interview. And I think you can apply that to your everyday life too, right? So if you go into your day job and you just hate it, like, you're starting your day off with this negative energy. But if you start getting up earlier and start, journaling, meditating, and exercising a little bit, and you change your mindset and start coming in there with a different level of energy, like that stuff kind of catches up with everybody else too.
yeah. To pull it back to the Home Depot thing, I mean, most people probably, and I could totally be going into Home Depot and bitching and complaining about minimum wage, and I mean, I'm lifting 60 pounds of bags of concrete and 100-pound pieces of lumber, and the deliveries, getting the stuff ready for these pro guys. But I reframed it. It's like Home Depot is paying for me to be exercised. I mean, I went down 2 suit sizes. I've only been working for Home Depot for just 6 weeks. I've gone 2 suit sizes. I've dropped 2 suit sizes.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, I mean, there are perks, so it's like, find it and focus on those things. I mean,
But the other
doing
thing is, though, like, I don't mean to cut you off, but it's like the people too, right? Like, the people are great there, right? Like, you're building relationships, you're connecting with different types of people, right?
well, I mean, I think everyone at Home Depot is nice. I believe everyone's nice. Um, but there are negative people. I will say though that I know we talked about it before, but I love talking to people, but I've always just sort of talked to people when I do, the shows and over, Zoom or whatever. And being on the floor and actually helping customers, it's like I'm using all these skill sets from the podcast of like learning how to read signals and create a conversation with people to try to effectively help them in their frustration of trying to solve a problem, whether it be finding a door handle or whatever little do it yourself project that they're trying to do for the weekend. So it's a choice. It's a choice to choose to go to that suck ass job every day and find the good in it and focus on that.
I love that. I love that. Enjoy the suck and embrace the suck, because it's a stepping stone, right? Like, if you don't like your job, if I'm just saying, like, use it as a stepping stone to the, look at it as a stepping stone to your next thing. You talk about helping people realize their dreams in your podcast, right? Like, in order to get to your dream, you're going to have to change a little bit, right? Like, you're going to, like, today, you're dreaming about doing something different in your life. Like, your dream is an image of you in that time period that you achieve it, and you're definitely not there yet. Like, you need to get better. You need to do the work, put in the work to get to that. And that's what I'm learning about myself is, I have this dream for myself and these goals, and the way that I look at it is, oh, why is it not happening quick enough? Well, it's not happening because everything is, in my opinion, God has His plan for me, there is no like timetable. There are no like these, I guess these checkpoints where I'm expected to hit or scheduled to hit. It's like I'll get to my success when I fully develop as the person that I'm supposed to be when I get there, and that means putting in the work, getting up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., doing all the work physically and emotionally to get to that part of success that I dream about, right? Like, but of course, I mean, God could throw a wrench in that plan real quick, and then He's testing you, and it could change, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure you feel like your life's when you quit your job, I'm sure you felt like, what is my next plan? But obviously, you're kicking ass. Like you know, you're turning this into a positive.
Yeah. There, I felt a little pity there for a while. I caught myself because it's like I did the right thing. Why am I having to go through this? I did the right thing.
Mm.
Um, but it's like you were saying before. What you were saying about you'll get there when you're supposed to get there when you transform and stuff. That's something that I always sort of admired from like the mid 20th century guys like Earl Nightingale and Napoleon Hill, which I think we've lost, right? That we were talking before about that pressure. Got to do it overnight. Got to be overnight. And if you're not overnight, then you're not a success. And it's like one of the things that I remember Earl Nightingale saying is that you've got to have to earn it, and you've got to become that thing, and that doesn't happen overnight. And that's such a lie.
Well, look at Grateful Dead, man. You know what I mean? Look how long it took them. And they didn't do anything. They didn't do any like mainstream marketing or anything like that. But I mean, you could say that about a lot of people. I think that everybody wants these 10 hacks to success, and it's they're not going to like my answer. It's put in the work.
Well, I think to go just a little bit deeper, it's like people want to stay the same way they are with all their bad thinking patterns and all their bad habits and still be successful. And you just can't do it because those are the very things that block you.
Mm.
Like you were saying, I'm going through this cleansing stripping period in order for me to be able to handle something. You know, you are the obstacle. Oh, that should be a book.
That's like a great quote right there. I love that quote. You are the obstacle.
You literally are the obstacle. I'm going to disagree with you a little bit about, God sort of throwing a wrench. It's like God's trying to get rid of all that stuff that's
Mm.
blocking you,
So he might be
and
he might be freeing you. He might be
yeah,
cutting that. He might be cutting the chain.
cutting the chain. And you just have to surrender into it and be still and let it happen. I mean, we were talking about on my show, right? It's like, I don't want to work for Home Depot. This is not where I imagined my life, but I asked for something very specific. And clearly, this is the best way in order for God to make that happen in my life. So you either gonna bitch and complain and resist it and stay where you are and maybe even go worse, or you're gonna, like you were saying before, you got to go through. You can't go around it, you can't go over it, you can't go under it, you can't avoid it, you can't delay it. You've got to go through.
Mm.
And it's gonna, right, we can curse on your show, right? I was gonna say it's gonna fucking suck. Growth sucks. And anyone who tells you otherwise is a liar.
No, it all
uh,
sucks. It all sucks. But it's the part. It's life university, right? Like it is. We are here to learn,
yeah,
and we're here to get as many experiences as we can because that's how we grow as individuals. It's how we grow as our souls grow. You know, that's how we become the best version of ourselves. It's not by going through an easy, bunny slope life. It's going through the black diamonds at 100 miles an hour, like, fucking head down, ready to go. Like that's how you're gonna hit some obstacles and you're gonna get some bumps and bruises and probably break a leg. But it makes you stronger at the end of the day if you don't die.
yeah. I mean, you got to go through the furnace. Although I think I'm not a Old Testament kind of guy. It's a real.
Yeah,
I'm
neither am
not.
I.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me with what Jesus was saying. He sort of redefined the definition of God being spirit and not this man in the sky, with a beard. But I will say though that I clearly especially now, I really understand the story, the myth story of Joseph and being wrongfully imprisoned, but somehow, he didn't let that, like you were saying on my show, you really love Viktor Frankl and that concept of him being in the internment camp, but he wasn't going to let them have his spirit. Joseph is the same thing. And I think there's value in that. It's
Mm.
like crappy things are going to happen to you. You don't, even when you're at this level of self confidence, um, and this is part of my problem sometimes with some Christians. It's like, I'm not supposed to have any problems. Well, no, life is problems. Jesus
Mm.
said, trials and tribulations for the rest of your life. Just cheer up. It's accept it, embrace it, and learn from it. And
No, you're right. I mean, people. I never thought about that. Like people will say, what did I do to deserve this? Like some bad things happen. What did I do to deserve this? And I think that it's all a test, right?
yeah,
It's all trying. I mean, some bad shit happens. Some bad shit happens. I mean, God forbid, anybody experience loss with a young person or a child or a loved one, but it's like it's all a test to see how strong you are and how you're gonna overcome it.
yeah, there's difficulties. And to quote Joyce, to give her credit on that, which was, when I started listening, I don't listen to her podcast anymore, but um, she was always find the treasure in the trial.
Hmm.
I think that that's a really powerful statement there, that it's like you're going to go through, so you might as well find the lesson. Like you were saying, we're here to learn things, to lessons, to grow, to strip, release stuff. And it's like you got two choices. You can be miserable or you can dig deep and find the gold.
Hmm.
And yeah,
I love that. Um, Whew, man, that's an intense conversation. I love it. Every time I talk to Billy, man, some nuggets fall out of that conversation for sure. How can people connect with you, Billy?
well, there's my show, Unshakable Self-Confidence. The website is unshakableselfconfidence.com. Um, I'm not really on Facebook. There technically is a page, but I'm on Instagram at Unshakable Self-Confidence because it's more of a blog format. So, I post the show there, the inspirational quotes like every other life coach, but I'm actually sharing my journey, like, what I'm going through. I'm trying to be that lead by example. And so I find Instagram is better for that.
You're living proof of the journey, right? Like you're not like one of those Facebook, post a picture of a lion with a quote like guy. You're actually living what you're speaking, and I love that about you. You're authentic.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Donald Miller, he helped me transform last year. He was like, "You're still trying to be Luke Skywalker." He's like, "You need to be Yoda." And
Mm.
I knew exactly what he meant by that. So I'm Yoda, man.
I want to say thank you to Billy Atwell for hanging out and joining the show today. I want to say thank you to you, the listener, for hanging out and downloading. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, please hit subscribe and leave a rating and a review. It helps me scale the podcast and get this into the earbuds of those who might need it. So thank you guys so much for hanging out. If you want to follow me on social platforms, you can do that on Instagram at TDowns80, on Twitter at DownsTrey, and on Facebook at Trey Downs. You can like the community on Facebook as well, Your Superior Self, and follow and see some of the behind-the-scenes footage or pictures of the family and quotes and all that good stuff. So thank you guys so much for hanging out. You can also check out the show on the website, yoursuperiorself.com, and sign up for the email list and get every episode sent directly to your inbox. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. This has been awesome, and I can't wait to talk to you guys next week. Later.